Hey guys, Pier here to tell you about the latest from Unleashed Fire Upon Your Lens, out August 15th on Napalm Records. The album has 11 tracks, 38 minutes in length, and this is the band's 15th full-length studio album. They are a Swedish death metal band. First and foremost, this is a concept record, but the design of the album, while playing off of the concept, is not completely driven by it. And what I mean by that is that this is a record where you can take each and every single song out of the overall context of the album and they work great. Every song, every story has its own place, has its own room to breathe, to exist outside of the record. That gives a lot more mobility and makes the overall album design feel a lot more dynamic. When you add that to the fact that it's 11 songs, 38 minutes, the experience feels quite short because these songs have such a drive to them, majority of them have such a drive to them, that then shortening the overall length of the record makes the tracks feel even faster, even heavier, even harder. Great design, a design that minimizes any single flaw that the record could have or that the individual songs could create, and maximizes all of the great qualities that this album will put forward. Once you get into the sound experience of this album, it's definitely a death metal record, but it's not your prototypical death metal album from top to bottom. It's an album that brings in other influences that help create the right nuances in order to give each and every single song a little bit of an individual fingerprint, a little bit of an individual touch. Either be a more melodic death metal sound experience or even a black metal influence in some of the riffs and the overall darkness that the album has, because sound wise and then from the atmosphere that breathes out of that sound, you cannot deny the overall darkness of this record. So having these elements create a much richer environment makes the death metal sound of this album a lot more palpable. It makes it a lot more digestible, but it also plays really well into the individual storytelling of each and every single track. Each and every single song requires a different approach, maybe not a unique approach, but a different approach, so that the story resonates, so that the lyrics come to life, so that the experience flourishes. And I think that's what you're going to find on this album. You're going to find an old school Swedish death metal sounding record with influences that dictate a little bit more the specific direction in which this record is going. A more melodic side, a darker side, a more driven side, more penetrating, more narrow, a more width. There's a little bit of everything under the sun as far as this record is concerned, and I think that gives the record sound-wise a lot for the listener to process. Now, within that sound, there are two main core elements, perhaps one more than the other, and that is the guitars and drums. The guitars definitely play a more emphasized role. This is a very guitar-focused, a very guitar-driven album. When you look at the more melodic side of the record, when you look at the black metal influences on the album, when you look at the more traditional Swedish death metal sound, all of that is dictated by the most part by the guitar sound, by the approach and the execution of that same guitar sound. And that allows the guitars to always feel like they are in the forefront. On this record, there is definitely a clear distance between bass and drums and guitars. Guitars have a lot more room to maneuver, they have a lot more room to breathe, they have a lot more width. They're not just driving the sound and making the sound very driven, they're also allowing the sound at times to have a much larger bandwidth and other times to make the sound feel quite narrow. The more narrow you go, the darker the track feels. The more width you give, the warmer the track comes across as. So this album really depends a lot on the guitar sound, but where the guitars sit in the mix makes them feel even more important. Now, the other element being the drums, I thought was interesting that they felt a little bit more subjugated to a secondary role, sitting a little bit further back as far as the overall production and the overall mix is concerned. I don't mind this approach because I still felt like the drums played an important role in creating, at the very least, the foundation, the basis for the heaviness, but also for the size of these songs, which then allows the guitars to have more of a predominant role and sit a little bit further away from them, but still finding ways to connect the two. So it's a different style, it's a different approach, but one that allows more room for the guitars to shine. It also allows for the guitar sound overall to be more intricate and allows the listener to pay more attention to all the nuances that exist within the overall guitar experience. Had the drums been a little bit closer to the guitars, there are pros and cons. The pros is that you would have gained a lot more thickness to the sound. The songs would have feel a lot stronger, a lot heavier, a lot more pungent, if you will. The downside of that is that the guitars and drums would perhaps collide with one another and the overall sound would feel a lot more dense. This is not a dense sounding record. There's a lot of clarity in the heaviness, in the volume, in the experience that the album offers. And I think the only way you can create an album with these kind of characteristics and keep it heavy, keep it death metal, but still allow the guitars to have their own space is to really separate those two elements a little bit. And that's exactly what the production on this album offers, still giving them, both of them, key roles and important roles in how the sound comes across, but separating them or keeping them at on different lanes definitely improves the overall experience of this record. When you get to the vocals are the most consistent, if not the consistent element throughout the entire album. The delivery, the style. And when it comes to the delivery and style, this album, obviously because of the concept, because of the record itself, the design that it has, the lyrical content, it really comes across more as a storytelling style vocal approach than anything else. It works really well on this album. It doesn't lose any of the aggression. It doesn't lose any of the intensity. If anything, it emphasizes it because it's able to stay consistent. It's able to stay linear from beginning to end. It's not like you're going to see a different style or a different vocal approach song by song. That's not the case. The approach is equal. Like I said, very linear throughout all 11 songs. But the approach itself is one of telling a story, more so than just singing words. And I think that is also a key fundamental aspect of why this record works as well as it does. It's definitely a very Viking inspired old school Swedish death metal record, but to be honest with you, I feel like this sort of experience, this sort of sound has been dying out throughout the years. Bands have almost grown out of this sound and out of this experience and moved into other arenas and changed and morphed into something very different from this. So getting a record that sounds like a Viking metal album, feels like a Viking metal album, and it tells stories of Vikings while sounding redundant or while sounding like it's nothing new, I think it felt very fresh to me. Because like I said, this genre is losing a little bit of its appeal because it's losing a little bit of its own character. Now, as far as favorite songs are concerned, I want to start off with Left for Dead. This is the opening track on the record. It's a very riff-driven song, and it's off to the races from the way it starts. It has a lot of intensity, a lot of aggression, and then it has a very simple chorus that really changes the flow of the song. The fact that the chorus is simple definitely makes it more memorable, and I think that is a great attribute for any song. The verses is more about the speed, is more about ripping through, creating this sense of just coming at you very fast, in your face, super aggressive, which makes the song very fluid, and it has some darkness in it as well. But the chorus is what helps sell the song. The simplicity of the chorus and the way the vocals and sound hits really allow that chorus to pop out and make something, become something of a beacon, if you will. It's also a track that has a great guitar solo section, and that is something that's true throughout the entire record. This album has great solos, and this track is no different. But the vocals and the main riff in that verse it's really the bread and butter of how this entire song is put together. Then you have A Toast to the Fallen, another track with just very good, driven, penetrating, ripping sound and guitars. The drums and bass in this song pop a little bit more than Left for Dead. They feel a little bit more like they're expanding within their own space, within their own realm. They still don't go and cross over and antagonize the guitar sound. It's not the case, but they definitely feel a little bit bigger, a little bit more impactful. Like each of these elements has its own lane, but the drums and bass lane has become slightly wider. At least that's the experience that I got from this song, which helps with the volume, it helps with the size of the track itself, and it also helps create some versatility within the song and within the overall experience that the track is offering. A track that has a lot of darkness in it, definitely one of the darker songs on this record, and not just a darkness that comes from the atmosphere of the track, but a darkness that exists even in the melody and guitar sound of the song itself. Another great solo section, really completing the track, and if there's a song where the vocals really feel like they're telling a story, this one is it. Last but not least, To My Only Son. This is a very robust sounding song, perhaps one of the few tracks on this record where the drums and bass is a little bit closer to the guitars and the segregation of the two is not as well defined as in some of the other tracks that this record has in store for you. This allows the sound at times to become a little bit more narrow, and then when those two elements break apart, then the song feels a little bit wider. So it's a song that from an overall perspective is not just driven forward by how the guitars approach it, it also has lateral movement. So it's moving in two different ways at the exact same time, forward and to the sides. That definitely gives a unique dynamic to the track. The track feels different because of it, and it's an important aspect because you're using the same elements throughout the record but presenting them in a different perspective. This allows the album not to sound repetitive, and it allows the album to feel fresh at every single turn. And this song, it's almost like a palette resetter. It resets the record, and it really helps redefine what the second half of the album is going to be all about. This is it, Unleashed with Fire Upon Your Lens. Once again, out August 15th on Napalm Records. Let me know your thoughts on the band. Hit me up in the comment section. I'll see you all in the next video. Take care, guys.